A boot smashed through a diner's front window. Glass exploded across the counter. A coffee pot shattered against the wall, brown liquid running down white tile. A man in a tailored suit stood in the middle of the wreckage, smiling. Behind him, two younger men laughed. They kicked over a chair, knocked a row of mugs off the shelf, tore a faded American flag off its hook and threw it to the floor. At the corner booth, an old man sat still. Gray beard, black leather vest, a half-eaten plate of eggs in front of him. He didn't flinch. He didn't stand. He just watched. The man in the suit walked over and grinned. He had no idea he had just kicked open the door of Earl Mackey's diner. What Earl Mackey was about to do would empty that street in under 3 minutes. Stay with me on this one. Now let me back up. Let me tell you who Earl Mackey is, because this story doesn't make sense unless you understand that. Earl was 67 years old that morning. He ran a diner off Route 93, just outside a town called Wickenburg, Arizona. 22 seats, 6 booths, a counter with 8 stools, eggs and bacon, pancakes, black coffee that he made himself every morning at 4:30. He'd owned the place for 31 years. Bought it after he came home from his second tour in Vietnam. His brother Frank didn't come home. Frank died in a rice paddy in 1971, and Earl carried the flag from Frank's casket back to Arizona, folded in a triangle, and hung it on the wall of the diner the day he opened. That flag had been on that wall for 31 years. Some of the threads were faded. The corner where Frank's blood had soaked in had darkened. Earl never washed it. He never replaced it. It stayed. Now here's the thing about Earl. To anyone who walked into that diner cold, he looked like an old biker. Gray beard down to his chest, long hair tied back, black leather vest, faded jeans, a pair of work boots he'd been wearing for at least 10 years. But the patches on that vest told a different story. If you knew what to look for: top rocker, bottom rocker, center patch, the death's head with wings, and under it 3 letters in red. The kind of patches you don't get from a gift shop. The kind of patches a man earns over 43 years. Earl wasn't just a Hell's Angel. Earl was the president of the Arizona Nomads. He'd been riding since 1972. He'd been a chapter president since 1986. And the men who had ridden with him over the decades, and the men who feared him, they didn't call him Earl. They called him Iron Earl. Because the story was that nothing got through. Not bullets. Not bad news. Not pain. Not loss. Iron Earl ran a quiet diner off Route 93. And he liked it that way. Most folks in town had no idea who he really was. They knew him as the old guy who served good eggs and didn't talk much. Maggie, his waitress, had been with him for 20 years. She knew, but she didn't say anything. That was the deal. Now, let me tell you about the man who walked into that diner that morning. Marcus Vance, 38 years old. Real estate developer out of Phoenix. Tan from a tanning bed. Watch worth more than a used car. Suit tailored in Italy. He'd grown up rich, gone to a good school, married a woman from a family with money, and convinced himself somewhere along the way that he was a self-made man. 6 months earlier, Marcus had bought the strip mall that contained Earl's Diner. He bought it cheap, planning to tear it down and build a chain hotel. 3 of the 4 tenants had taken his buyout offer and moved. Earl had not. Marcus had sent him 3 letters. Earl threw them away. Marcus had sent his lawyer. Earl told the lawyer the eggs were on the house, but the diner wasn't. Marcus had raised his offer twice. Earl had said no twice. The week before the smash, Marcus drove out to the diner himself. He sat across from Earl in the corner booth, drumming his fingers on the table, and laid out his last offer. Triple market value. Cash. Signed today. Earl looked at him over the top of a coffee cup. He said one sentence. He said, "Son, this place is the only thing in this world that's still mine, and there's not enough money in your bank to buy it." Marcus laughed. Marcus said, "Old man, I don't need your signature. I'll get you out of here one way or another. Earl nodded, drank his coffee, said nothing. That should have been the end of it. Most men, if they got that warning, they'd back off. They'd realize something was off. They'd ask around. They'd find out who Earl Mackey was. Marcus didn't ask around. Marcus drove back to Phoenix. He spent the weekend at his country club. And on Monday morning, he made a phone call to two men who worked for him doing the kind of work that doesn't go on a resume. He told them to bring tire irons. He told them to meet him at the diner at 6 in the morning, before the regulars came in. He told them they were going to teach the old biker a lesson. That was Marcus Vance's first mistake. It would not be his last. 6 in the morning. Earl was already there. He'd been there since 4. The coffee was made. The grill was warm. Maggie wasn't due in until 7. Earl was sitting in the corner booth with a plate of scrambled eggs and 3 strips of bacon, reading a folded-up newspaper, when the front door opened. He didn't look up. He heard 3 sets of boots come in. He heard the bell over the door bounce against the glass. He heard Marcus Vance's voice, loud, performative, like he was speaking to an audience. "Wakey, wakey, old-timer." Earl turned a page of the newspaper. "I told you I'd be back." Marcus walked over to the counter. He picked up a sugar shaker and dumped it on the floor. The sugar fanned out across the linoleum, white against gray. One of the men behind him laughed. Earl turned another page. "I gave you a fair offer," Marcus said. 3 times. "You think you're being tough. You think you're being a hero. But here's the thing about heroes, old man. They get tired. They get old. And eventually somebody comes along and reminds them they're not as tough as they think they are." Marcus picked up a tire iron from one of his men. He swung it at the row of mugs on the back shelf. Glass and ceramic exploded against the wall. Earl didn't move. The 2 men with Marcus started in on the place. One of them tipped a stool over. Another picked up a chair and threw it through the front window. The sound of the glass shattering filled the diner like a gunshot. Earl set down his fork. Marcus walked over to Earl's booth. He kicked the table. Earl's plate of eggs slid across the surface and into Earl's lap. Earl didn't react. Egg yolk soaked into the leather of his vest. "Look at me, old man." Earl looked up. Slow. Steady. His eyes were not the eyes of a frightened man. His eyes were the eyes of a man making a list. Marcus didn't notice. "You're going to sign the papers today," Marcus said. "Or my boys are going to come back tomorrow. And the day after. Until there's nothing left of this dump for you to defend." Earl said nothing. Marcus leaned in close. He said, "Look at this place. You think anyone's going to remember it? You think anyone's going to care?" He turned. He pointed at the wall where the flag hung. The flag Earl's brother had died next to. The flag that had been on that wall for 31 years. This trash, for example. This flag. You think you're patriotic? Hanging this filthy thing on the wall? It looks like somebody used it to wash a car. He grabbed it, pulled it down. The hook tore out of the wood. He threw it on the floor, stepped on it. That was the moment something changed in Earl's face. It wasn't anger. Anger is loud. What Earl felt you couldn't see. It was deeper than anger. It was the kind of cold that doesn't melt. It was a man taking a final inventory. Marcus didn't see it. Marcus was already laughing. Marcus was already turning toward the door. But Earl said something. Quietly, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. He said, "You shouldn't have touched that flag, son." Marcus stopped, turned around. "What did you just say to me?" Earl repeated it. Same calm voice. "You shouldn't have touched that flag." Marcus walked back over. He grabbed Earl's collar. He pulled him halfway up out of the booth. He brought his face within inches of Earl's. "Or what, old man? You gonna do something? Look at you. You can barely stand up." Earl didn't fight back. He just looked at Marcus. Calm. Like a man looking at a dog that didn't know it had just bitten the wrong hand. Marcus slapped him. Open-handed. across the face, hard enough that Earl's head turned and a cut opened on his lip. Earl turned his face back, looked at Marcus again, said nothing. Marcus shoved him back into the booth, spit on the floor, said, "Sign the papers. Today. Or tomorrow we burn this place down." He turned to his men. "We're done here." The three of them walked out, boots crunching on broken glass. The bell over the door rang as they left. A van outside started up, drove away. Then it was quiet. Earl sat in the booth for a long moment. Blood on his lip, egg on his vest, glass everywhere. He took out a handkerchief, dabbed his lip, folded the handkerchief, put it back in his pocket. He stood up, slowly, walked over to where the flag was lying on the floor. He picked it up, carefully, folded it, triangle, corner over corner, the way they teach you in basic. He set it on the counter. He walked back to his booth, sat down, picked up his coffee cup, took a sip. The coffee was still warm. He looked out the broken window. The morning light was coming up over the desert. A semi rolled past on the highway, going nowhere in particular. A bird landed on a fence post outside. The world, somehow, was continuing. He set the coffee cup down. He took a deep breath. He exhaled slowly. His shoulders dropped. He looked, for a moment, like an old man who had been beaten and was thinking about giving up. Maggie's truck pulled up out front. She got out. She was 63 years old, in a pink waitress uniform, carrying a paper bag of biscuits she'd baked the night before. She walked up to the door. She stopped when she saw the broken glass. "Earl?" He looked up. "Earl. Oh my God, what happened?" "Some men came in," he said. "Made a mess." She came inside, stepped carefully over the glass. She looked at his lip. She looked at the egg on his vest. She looked at the flag, folded on the counter. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Maggie." "Should I call the sheriff?" Earl shook his head. "No," he said. "Don't call the sheriff." She looked at him for a long moment. "Earl, what are you going to do?" He smiled, just a little, just at the corner of his mouth. He said, "I'm going to finish my coffee." And he picked up the cup again, took another sip. And the morning continued on, like nothing had happened. Maggie went to the back to get a broom. Earl finished his coffee. He set the cup down. He stood up. He walked over to the counter. Behind the counter, mounted on the wall, was an old rotary telephone. Black, dial worn smooth from 40 years of use. Earl picked up the receiver. He dialed 7 numbers. It rang twice. Somebody picked up on the other end. Earl spoke 6 words. "It's Earl. The diner. Need brothers." He listened for 2 seconds. Said, "Yeah." Hung up. Then he dialed another number. Said the same thing. Then another. He made 9 phone calls in 7 minutes. After the last call, he hung up. He stood there for a moment. Then he walked back to his booth. Sat down. Picked up his newspaper. Started reading again. And here's where the story changes. Because what Marcus Vance didn't understand, what he couldn't have understood, was that the diner he'd just smashed up wasn't the property of an old man. That diner was the unofficial headquarters of the Arizona Nomads. And the man Marcus had just slapped was the president. And the flag Marcus had thrown on the floor wasn't just a flag. That flag had been carried home from Vietnam by the brother of the man Marcus had just slapped. And every Hell's Angel in a 5-state radius knew what that flag meant. They had all heard the story. They had all stood in front of it. They had all touched it before they took their oath. Marcus had not slapped an old man. Marcus had spit on a brotherhood. And brotherhoods, believe me, do not forget. Within 40 minutes, the first bike rolled into the parking lot. Then another. Then 3 more. By 8 in the morning, there were 12 bikes outside the diner. By 9, there were 30. By 10, there were over 70. They came in from Phoenix, from Tucson, from Flagstaff, from Albuquerque. Some had ridden through the night. Some had been on patrol. Some were retired guys in their 70s who hadn't ridden in months. Didn't matter. When the call went out, they came. Maggie watched them pull in through the broken window, her hand pressed over her mouth. Earl walked outside to greet them. One by one, he shook every hand. He spoke quietly to each man. He pointed to the broken window. He pointed to the flag, now refolded and resting on the counter inside. Each man nodded. Each man's face hardened. A black SUV pulled up. A man got out. Big, bald, 65 years old. Earl's vice president, a man named Tank, who had served with Earl in Vietnam, ridden with Earl since 1973, and had once driven across 2 states to bury a brother. Tank walked up to Earl. The two of them stood in the parking lot. Tank looked at Earl's lip, looked at the egg stain on the vest, looked at the flag through the open door. Tank said, "Who?" Earl said, "Marcus Vance. Real estate. Phoenix." Tank said, "Address." Earl told him. Tank said, "We riding now or later?" Earl said, "Later. Let me eat." Tank nodded, walked back to the SUV, got on the radio. "Now, let me cut to Marcus." Marcus was back in Phoenix. He was in his corner office on the 17th floor of a glass building downtown. He had just finished telling the story to his wife over speakerphone. He was laughing. He'd told her how the old man had just sat there, how he'd slapped him, how the place was practically theirs already. His wife, Diana, was quiet on the other end. Marcus said, "Babe, you there?" She said, "What did you say his name was?" Marcus said, "Some old biker. Mackey. Earl Mackey." There was a long silence. She said, "Marcus." Marcus said, "What?" She said, "Marcus, get out of the office. Right now. Get in your car. Drive home." Marcus laughed. He said, "Diana, what are you talking about?" She said, "Marcus, listen to me. My father knows that name. My father has talked about that name. Earl Mackey is not someone you do this to. Do you understand me?" Marcus said, "Honey, calm down. He's an old man with a diner. I scared him. He's going to sign the papers. It's done." Diana said one more thing. She said, "Get out of the office. Now, please." Marcus hung up on her. He sat at his desk. He poured himself a scotch. He looked out the window at downtown Phoenix in the morning light. He told himself his wife was being dramatic. He told himself everything was fine. That was Marcus's second mistake. Now hold on a second. Before we go any further, if you're still with me on this story, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button down below. Because what's about to happen to Marcus Vance is the kind of justice you don't see coming. The kind that arrives quietly. The kind that arrives with 70 bikes pulling into a parking lot at the same time. Stay with me. Back at the diner, Earl finished a fresh plate of eggs. Maggie had cooked it for him while the parking lot filled up. He ate slowly, drank a second cup of coffee, read the paper. The men outside waited. When Earl was done, he stood up. He took off his egg-stained vest. He folded it. He put on a clean one Tank had brought him. The clean one had the same patches, the same faded threads, the same death's head with wings. He walked outside. 70-some men were standing around their bikes in the parking lot. Some smoking, some waiting. All of them turned when Earl walked out. Earl said, "Thank you, brothers. Mount up." 70 engines started at the same time. Earl threw a leg over a Harley that had been polished by Tank's son. He kicked it to life. He pulled out of the parking lot first. The rest of them fell in behind him in formation, 2 by 2, down Route 93, toward Phoenix, toward the 17th floor of a glass building, toward Marcus Vance. The ride to Phoenix took an hour and 40 minutes. 70-some Harleys, 2 by 2, down the desert highway, the kind of formation people pull over to watch. The kind of formation that gets called in to the highway patrol. 3 patrol cars actually showed up. The lead trooper rolled up next to Earl. Looked at him. Looked at the column behind him. Said, "Earl." Earl said, "Mike." The trooper nodded. Pulled away. The patrol cars peeled off. You see, Earl had done a lot of favors for a lot of people over 40 years. And not all of them wore patches. Some of them wore badges. Some of them wore robes. Some of them sat on city councils. The mistake men like Marcus Vance always made was assuming an old biker had no friends. The column rolled into downtown Phoenix at 12:30 in the afternoon. Office workers stopped on the sidewalks. Phones came out. Within minutes, video was on the internet. The bikes pulled up around the glass building where Marcus had his office. They didn't block the streets. They parked. Calmly. In rows. Like they'd been doing this their whole lives. "Don't write. You don't exist to me." Marcus nodded again. Earl said, "Choice number 2. You don't do any of that. And every brother you saw in the parking lot downstairs makes you the project of the rest of his life. We don't kill you, Marcus. Killing's easy. We make you wish we had. We follow your wife. We follow your kids. We make sure every business deal you ever try collapses. We make sure no bank lends you $1. We make sure every venue you walk into knows your name. Forever." Marcus was crying. Earl said, "Which one, son?" Marcus said, "The first one. Please, the first one." Earl nodded. He pulled the knife out of Marcus's hand. Marcus collapsed forward, holding his hand, breathing hard. Earl said, "Stand up." Marcus stood, knees shaking. Marcus said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'm so sorry." Earl said, "I know you didn't know. That's the only reason you get a choice." Marcus tried to step back. He bumped against the desk. Tank had come into the office now, set the duffel bag on the floor. Earl said, "Now, one more thing." He stepped forward. Marcus flinched. Earl said, "You raised a hand to me this morning." Marcus said, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry." Earl moved. 3 motions. Knee to Marcus's ribs. Forearm to his throat. Palm to his sternum. Marcus hit the wall behind him. Slid down. Sat on the carpet, gasping. A dark stain spread across the front of his pants. Earl looked down at him. His voice was calm. He said, "Tomorrow morning. The diner. 8 a.m. You bring a check. You bring an apology. You bring whatever's left of your dignity." He turned. Walked to the door. Tank picked up the duffel bag. At the door, Earl turned back. He said, "And son, don't ever touch a man's flag again. Anywhere. For the rest of your life." He walked out. The next morning, Marcus Vance pulled up to the diner at 7:58. He was alone. His hand was bandaged. His face was pale. He sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before he opened the door. The diner had a new front window. Earl had paid for it himself. He didn't want Marcus's money for the window. The window wasn't the point. Inside, Maggie was wiping down the counter. The flag was back on the wall. Repaired. Maggie had stitched it the night before, where the hook had torn through. The stitches were not invisible. They were small and careful and visible. They told a story. They said, "This got hurt and someone fixed it." A small camera was set up on a tripod by the counter. A reporter from a local paper sat on a stool, drinking coffee, waiting. Earl was in his corner booth, reading the paper. Same as always. Marcus walked in. The bell rang. He stopped just inside the door. He said, "Mr. Mackey." Earl looked up, folded his paper, said, "Morning, Marcus." Marcus walked over. Slowly. He had an envelope in his hand. He looked at Maggie. He said, "Ma'am, I'm here to apologize to you for what I did to your workplace yesterday morning. I was wrong. I was disrespectful. I am sorry. I will pay for everything. And I'll be leaving Arizona. Maggie nodded, said nothing. The reporter clicked the camera. Marcus held out the envelope. Earl gestured at the counter. Marcus set it down. Earl said, "Thank you, Marcus. Have a safe trip." Marcus stood there for a second, like he wanted to say something else, like he wanted to ask for forgiveness or shake a hand, or be told that everything was going to be all right. Earl didn't offer any of that. Marcus turned, walked out. The bell rang. His car started up. He drove away. He never came back. The strip mall was sold the next week to its previous owner. The hotel project was canceled. Marcus and his wife moved to a small town in Oregon. He took a job selling insurance. As far as anyone in Arizona ever heard, he didn't come back. He didn't call. He didn't write. He stopped existing to the brotherhood, which, when you really think about it, was exactly the deal Earl had offered him. Earl finished his paper. He poured himself another cup of coffee. He sat in his booth, looking out the new window, at the desert stretching out toward the morning sun. Maggie came over, refilled his cup. She said, "Earl." Earl said, "Yes, Maggie." She said, "Are you all right?" Earl said, "I'm all right." She said, "I never knew. Not really. I knew you were one of them, but I didn't know." Earl smiled, a small, tired smile. He said, "Most folks don't, Maggie. That's how I like it." She nodded, patted his shoulder, walked back to the counter. A few minutes later, the bell over the door rang again. A young man came in, 22, maybe 23, crew cut, Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm. New looking, recent. He wore a t-shirt and jeans. He looked like he'd just gotten back. He sat down at the counter, ordered eggs, bacon, coffee. He looked over at the wall. He saw the flag. He saw the stitches. He turned to Maggie. He said, "Ma'am, that flag. Did somebody hurt it?" Maggie looked over at Earl. Earl nodded at her, just a small nod. She said, "Somebody tried, sweetheart, but we fixed it." The young Marine looked at the flag for a long moment. He didn't say anything. He just looked at it. When his food came, he started to reach for his wallet. Earl spoke from his booth. He said, "Marine, your money's no good in here." The young man turned around, looked at Earl, saw the patches, saw the gray beard, saw the eyes. He said, "Sir." Earl said, "On the house. Welcome home." The young man's eyes filled up. He nodded. He couldn't speak for a second. Then he said, "Thank you, sir." Earl said, "Eat your breakfast, son." The young Marine ate his eggs. He drank his coffee. When he was done, he stood up and walked over to Earl's booth. He put out his hand. He said, "Sir, can I ask? The flag. Where did it come from?" Earl looked at the flag for a long moment. He said, "It came home from Vietnam, with my brother Frank. In 1971, he died over there, 21 years old. They folded that flag and put it in my hand at the funeral. And I hung it on this wall the day I opened this place." The young Marine looked at the flag again. He nodded, slow, like he understood something he didn't quite have words for. He said, "Thank you for your service, sir." And for his. Earl said, "Thank you for yours, son." The Marine walked out. The bell rang. The morning continued. Earl reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small piece of metal on a faded chain. A dog tag, Frank Mackey, stamped in 1969. He held it for a moment. Then he tucked it back into his vest pocket, right over his heart, where he had carried it every day for 55 years. He picked up his coffee cup. He looked out at the desert. Outside, a single Harley rolled past on the highway. The rider raised a hand as he passed. Earl raised his back, through the window. The bike disappeared down the road, toward the horizon. The diner was quiet. The flag was on the wall. The morning was warm. Some men, you see, carry a weight you can't see from the outside. They look like old men. They look like folks who can't push back. They look like people the world has worn down. But what the world has worn down sometimes is also what the world has hardened. And the man who tries to break that kind of man, believe me, he's the one who breaks.